Before the discovery of antibiotics, people died in their millions. When penicillin became available, it literally saved hundreds of thousands of lives. The next blockbuster drug was cortisone in the 50s. It miraculously suppressed inflammation and pain. Thus, the myth of a drug for a bug, a pill for an ill was born, and the pharmaceutical industry started to flourish. But then the dark side of cortisone emerged. Those on the drugs gained a lot of weight, their spines degenerated, and if withdrawn suddenly, they could even die. It was these side effects that gave birth to the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs, such as aspirin and ibuprofen. Very effective painkillers, but they can also cause internal bleeding. About 3,000 people in the UK die because of it every year. So along came the next generation, like Vioxx, painkillers without the gut damage. That was the promise, but they promoted blood clotting and increased your risk of heart disease. In America, one expert estimated that 140,000 people died or now suffer from vascular problems as a result. A similar story applies to many common drugs for today's chronic diseases. Take heart disease, for example. The story was simple. Cholesterol and fat causes heart disease, so eat a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet and take cholesterol-lowering statin drugs. Egg sales went into decline and statin sales boomed. These were so heavily promoted that some experts have recommended putting statins in the water supply. In 2007, the UK government's Heart Disease Supremo said that every man over 50 and woman over 65 should be on them. Today, an estimated 8 million people in Britain take statins. Doctors are financially rewarded for both testing and lowering your cholesterol with drugs. The top 3 selling statins alone have generated over $200 billion to date, but the patents have run out, and so has the enthusiasm to sell them. But, surprise, surprise, there are new superstatins in the pipeline with new patents to capture the profit. And now we're being told that the old statins increase your risk for diabetes and memory loss and do relatively little to reduce heart disease risk. Around 1,000 healthy people who haven't had a heart attack but do have some risk factors have to take statins for just one death from heart attack to be avoided. And meanwhile, 100 would be expected to have significant adverse effects. After the most popular diabetes drug metformin ran out of patent, the next hero drugs were the glitazones, until they were found to increase the risk for heart disease. Next on offer for diabetes are the GLP-1 agonists, widely advertised in the US, but already there are warning signs of a link with pancreatic cancer. But if you ask a man in the street what causes diabetes, they'll probably say sugar and obesity. Yet doctors are taught a lot more about drugs than diet and how to help people lose weight. And I mean a lot. One leading medical school in the UK spends less than 10 minutes on diet. Few even know that type 2 diabetes, which is the main kind, is a completely reversible disease with the right diet, which is a low glycemic load, or GL, diet. A low GL diet also cuts the risk for heart disease, Alzheimer's and cancer. Talking of cancer, we are losing the cancer war, not winning it. Back in the 70s, when lifetime risk for cancer was 1 in 5, despite everyone smoking, now it's 1 in 3, and it's expected to hit 1 in 2 by 2030. And since 1970, the 5-year survival rate has barely changed from then 49% to now 54% surviving. In the US, for example, more than 1 million people are diagnosed every year and 500,000 people die from cancer. Our ancestors were not only fit, they ate fit food. Lean meat, fish, fruit, vegetables, whole foods. Before the invention of fridges and refined food, all food was fresh and whole. Before cars, we burnt a lot more calories through exercise, we ate a lot more fresh food, and got a lot more nutrients as a consequence. Now, the average person around the world eats 24 kilos of sugar a year. This mountain of sugar is also driving weight gain. Obesity is widespread. 12 million people in Britain are obese, and over 500 die every week as a result of it. 1 in 3 adult Americans are obese, predicted to be 1 in 2 by 2030. The global prediction is that we will have 2 billion people significantly overweight and 500 million with diabetes. Already, for every person who dies from starvation, 2 die from obesity. The solution is diet, not drugs. In Britain, we have a 5-a-day policy. By the age of 65, half of us are on 5 different drugs, 1 for each bit that breaks down. Following official medical guidelines, which results in multiple drug taking, is one of the greatest but most invisible threats to health in the aging population. Drugs also among vitamins. The most popular diabetes drug, metformin, inhibits B12 absorption and gives some people stomach trouble. Not to worry, there's a drug for that, PPI drugs that stop you making stomach acid, such as omeprazole, which has clocked up over $50 billion in sales. But you need stomach acid to absorb B12, and if you don't, your brains and your bones are likely to shrink at a faster rate. Not to worry, there's a drug to stop your bones shrinking, bisphosphonates, but they knock out iron. Osteoporosis, like every other chronic disease, isn't caused by a lack of drugs, although it can be caused by an excess. Nor is it caused by a lack of calcium for that matter. If you draw a map of the instance of lowest osteoporosis across the world and a map of the highest calcium or milk intake, they bear no resemblance. In fact, the Milky Way, where most milk is drunk, is pretty much where you see the highest instance of 21st century diseases. Milk doesn't keep your bones strong. The further north, the greater the risk. Sun exposure, which makes vitamin D, can help you a lot more than any drug. And if you live far from the equator, it's all rather depressing. Maybe that's why more than 1 in 10 North Americans have been prescribed antidepressants. But guess what? They don't work for mild or moderate depression, and they double the risk of suicide, according to a British Medical Journal review of 702 studies. As antidepressant prescriptions rise in the US, so too does the incidence of suicide. When makers of schizophrenia drugs known as antipsychotics wanted to increase their market share, they changed their name to mood stabilizers. Then, simultaneously, more and more depressed people were diagnosed as bipolar, enabling them to be given antipsychotic mood stabilizer drugs as well as antidepressants. Double the number of diagnoses and double the drugs you can prescribe when you've got 4 times the market. Drugs for mental illness generate in excess of $220 billion a year. In the time of Hippocrates, disease was thought to be caused by the gods. He didn't buy that and set out to find the real causes of disease. He had a hunch a lot was down to diet and lifestyle. Let food be your medicine, he said. Our current fixation with genes as the mysterious causes of disease are a bit like the gods of old, because genes play a relatively small role in most of the diseases you or I are likely to get. A maximum of 15% of the risk for breast cancer is due to inherited factors, and since not all inheritance is genetic, this means that even less is in the genes. Lately, people have become paranoid about having a cancer gene, and more people are electing to remove their breasts, their ovaries, and for men, prostate, just in case, without realizing that genes can be turned on or off by what you eat. After all, both breast and prostate cancer incidence goes up and up with every generation, yet the genes haven't changed. So why didn't your grandmother get breast cancer? This idea of removing the part that may get disease is a perverse kind of prevention. What do you remove for heart disease or Alzheimer's? One of the editors of the journal Nature said by the end of this century, genomics will allow us to fashion the human form into any conceivable shape. We will have extra limbs if we want them, and maybe even wings to fly. When the human genome was being mapped, it was predicted that we humans, being the most advanced species, would have around 100,000 genes. When it was finally unraveled, we had a paltry 23,000. That's a bit more than a fruit fly with 17,000, less than a sea urchin has 26,000, and much less than rice at 38,000. All we know genes do is tell the body how to put proteins together, which makes enzymes, for example, and having defective enzymes could increase your risk for disease, but it rarely causes it. They don't give you wings. Only 1% of Alzheimer's, for example, is actually caused by genes. It's what you eat and how you live that switches genes on and off. For example, a low-GL diet switches on genes that keep you healthy, while sugar, on the other hand, turns them off. Instead of removing the body part, why not remove the diet part, such as sugar in the case of diabetes, or dairy products in the case of prostate or possibly breast cancer? According to the National Cancer Institute, 19 out of 23 studies have shown a positive association between dairy intake and prostate cancer. If I told you I was 55 and still breastfeeding from another species of animal, you'd think I was weird. But name me one wild animal that breastfeeds into adulthood. Milk makes things grow. Unfortunately, that includes cancer cells. Hippocrates said, "First, do no harm." Yet prescription drugs have now become the 5th largest cause of death in the US and account for tens of thousands of deaths every year in the UK. Whichever way you cut it, modern medicine seems to have very little to do with health. Countries with more doctors don't have less disease, nor do countries that spend more on so-called healthcare. When doctors go on strike, the death rate falls, according to Professor Robert Mendelsohn, who monitored medical malpractice for the US government. He called hospitals temples of doom and recommended staying away from them and medical checkups. There is, of course, a giant elephant in the hospital. The cause of the big 5 killer diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and Alzheimer's, isn't a lack of drugs. We are literally digging our own graves with a knife and fork. The reason our healthcare systems are failing is that no one is talking seriously about how to change the 21st century diet and lifestyle that's killing us. We've gone from eating no sugar to over £150 a year in the US, and we've switched to a cheaper but even deadlier form of sugar called high fructose corn syrup. We have been frucked. A 2-litre bottle of cola literally gives you 50 teaspoons of sugar. We should be taxing sugar and sugary drinks as we do alcohol and cigarettes, and spending it on health and nutrition education. Instead, the best funded strategy for beating obesity is the billion-dollar search for new drugs. The vast majority of health conditions you are likely to suffer from in life primarily result from too much of the bad stuff and or not enough of the good stuff. When you repeatedly go for the bad stuff, your health lists towards the bad side. Your body goes into an unhealthy, inflammatory state which promotes disease. The sicker you are, the more of the good stuff you need, and that's why high amounts of vitamins and minerals work. But supplements are a competitor to drugs, and as such there's a steady stream of myths about supplement dangers. In truth, no one has ever died from taking a vitamin supplement. You have in fact more chances of dying from being struck by lightning. My definition of good medicine is fourfold. 1, it's proven to work. It prevents or helps reverse disease processes by addressing the real causes. 2, it's good for your health, even if you're not sick. 3, it conforms with your natural design and evolutionary principles. 4, it does no harm. Hippocrates was on the case more than 2,000 years ago, concluding that when enough sins against nature have accumulated, disease suddenly results. The risk factors for Alzheimer's, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, they're all very similar. It's 21st century diet and lifestyle that's killing us, not a lack of drugs. My latest book, Good Medicine, applies these principles to today's 75 most common diseases. Most of the advice about diet and lifestyle is not known to your doctor, not because there isn't good scientific evidence, but simply because it isn't taught in medical school. The truth is, if you want to find out how to prevent or reverse most of today's chronic disease, you are going to have to find out for yourself. The only person who can transform your health is you.